What's up, guys? It's Marshall from Natural One for the Tilted Roll podcast today. Franny fled the country, so I'm alone today. He is actually on a cruise for the next week, so I have to do this episode solo, and I'm doing it super late because I had spent all of my time doing work and Katsukan editing last week, and it just kind of got away from me. So my bad, but we'll have a very relevant topic today, which is going to be the just posted yesterday, from this episode, Unearthed Arcana for 2020, which is going to be awesome. It has some things that I'm really excited about for Artificer, Druid, and Ranger. I'm super pumped, but it does bring up a question that I'm going to talk about slightly at the end, so make sure you're staying tuned for that. Otherwise, just as a quick run around for things that I'm kind of in the works on. I'm wrapping up post-production on my video about making a class from your background rather than from your the class itself. So that's going to be coming up soon. Otherwise, we are just going to be having another we're going to have one more non-Francisco filled podcast, but we'll hopefully feature another member of the Natural One crew here. So stay tuned for that one. Otherwise, let's get into Unearthed Arcana here. So let's kind of get right into it. Right on the page here, we're going to start with we're going to be using the PDF version mainly because it is actually not yet out on D&D Beyond. So we unfortunately are without... we are going to be kind of just doing this with the good old-fashioned way on a little PDF. This is something I've really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed the Unearthed Arcana experiences most of the time. I love being able to play new stuff that may even not last forever. Rest in peace, Circle of Twilight Druid. May all of our edgelords, take that night into the whatever. Okay, that was just bad. I'm getting sick, so definitely my improv is nowhere near as good as it should be. All right, so let's start with just go right ahead into this with the Artificer. So the armor, I'm going to tell you now from what I've pre-checked and all this stuff. I made sure to read through this beforehand. So when we talked about this is less of a pure reaction, a little bit more of a somewhat of an overview, but this also is kind of my genuine reactions to these. And so the armor I absolutely love. I can tell you already that I love it so much. So the proficiency with heavy armor is not something that I felt like the Artificer was really lacking. That's something that never really was the case in Artificers previously, but it's also something that doesn't inherently not make sense. So as a result, I think it's something that definitely can be really cool. Having proficiency with Smith tools does just make this somewhat similar to Battlesmith, and that's something about the Armorer and kind of creating subclasses for the Artificer that I've kind of struggled with as a whole, and I've started to kind of notice, is that it's very hard to at least immediately think of subclasses for the Artificer that do not immediately run into certain similarities with the Battlesmith, especially if any of them are combat oriented, and that's something I'm actually personally running into the issue of, because I'm trying to design one now, and I'm running into this issue of of having it be a little too similar to the Battlesmith, and especially with the Armorer here now, it may make it a little less, even what I have in mind, even less so kind of relevant, but we're going to see about that later. So let's start then. The armorer spells that they get, I absolutely love. So Magic Missile and Shield obviously make a ton of sense for both the way that this subclass is going to work, and also just for giving, a really cool spell, like force, giving a force spell, kind of makes sense for what the kind of, I guess the focus that a lot of this Unearthed Arcana is kind of going for, since a lot of it is psychic and force kind of damage type things, giving them having it be passed with a magic missile, which just force damage at least, does kind of make a lot of sense. Mirror Image and Shatter, great spells. Shatter is obviously in the way it has its downsides like Thunderwave in terms of the pure how audible this spell is. There's no stealth way to really cast Shatter. They may not know you did it, if anything, in terms of silent casting, but the spell will always be very audible. But at least with Shatter versus Thunderwave, you can do it somewhere else. It's not on your person, which is what's helpful. So Hypnotic Pattern and Lightning Bolt. Hypnotic Pattern is, I would say, makes sense for what the Artificer actually does. But then Lightning Bolt, I think, is really good just because there's not already a whole lot of offensive spells for the Artificer. They have a lot of utility-based spells. So if you're looking for somewhat of an offensive build for your Artificer, there's not many spells to really go for. That's why the two other subclasses that kind of give you offensive spells, at least for being an offensive build, really, like why these bonus spells in your subclass really are useful. For example, in the Artillerist, essentially the arcane gun wouldn't make a whole lot of sense without any of this extra bonus spells. Not because that gives you Scorching Ray as one of your spells, which you wouldn't get otherwise, and even Fireball. Definitely, like getting these spells usually add a lot to the motif of these subclasses, which is what I really like. So now we're going to go into the kind of the coup de grace of this subclass, which is the Power Armor. So, we've gone full on Fallout in D&D now. This is pushing us over the top. We're going over the top. And I love this ability. This absolutely is awesome. I love it so much. So you turn your suit of heavy armor, as long as you have your smith's tools, essentially into something that removes the strength requirement, so you don't have to worry about having the strength requirement, which is nice, because obviously the idea is that if you're going to be proficient with it, you should be able to wear it. So this allows you to not have to have a decent strength. You can still have just focus on your intelligence in terms of like having things like 27-point builds and the like that, where you don't always get to have the most balanced, or you don't get to have a 15 in your intelligence and still generally have 14s and enough of the other stats to really help in terms of like long-term play, without like needing a whole lot of magic items to kind of supplement your average stats in terms of like true player to like player playability, or I should say PC playability. So the Power Armor then also works as a spellcasting focus, mainly just kind of continuing to help with the aspect of, you do not need to have like the tools in your hands to cast your spells. Makes it really useful for when you want to be more of an offensive type of Artificer. Battlesmith is very similar, and similarly also the Artillerist with the arcane gun. When you shoot your spells with the gun, therefore you have the capability of just using that as your spell focus, and therefore you don't need the wand at all, which is really nice. Although it technically is the wand, yada yada. But this kind of helps make that a little bit clear for people who are especially playing in games that are a little more kind of to the rules. They're not really yada-yadaing as many things as many people like to do. But they're definitely something that is useful. I don't know why I'm spending so much time on this. Let's see. So yes, it can't be removed against your will, which is nice. What I find funny is I like how they specify that it replaces any missing limbs functioning identically to a body part it is replacing. Does this technically can you somehow like essentially pull some type of like Alphonse move where you're essentially most of the body is being replaced by this armor? You are effectively not a person without the armor. It'd be really funny. It's something that you can maybe play with in a homebrew, if anything. But I think it'd be really good. But so obviously all this does is just gives enablings of how to allow that power armor to work. Now that's all well and good, but obviously now as far as we have read, all of the things are just to their stats, right? It's just normal. Like, so if you're wearing a full plate that you've turned into your power armor, it's still a 19 AC, nothing's changing. Now we move to the armor model, and this is where it gets good. So essentially, you'll be able to choose between 2 different models. This will also allow you, when you attack with essentially with a special weapon that it will be brought up with this armor, it will allow you to use your intelligence mod for that special weapon. So you will still have to use like strength if you want to use any other weapon. But these are things that do help you out, strength or dexterity with any other weapon. But this definitely is something that can be really cool. So Guardian has one of my favorite aspects of this because it's the one that I feel makes the most sense, and that's the Thunder Gauntlets. So you have armored fists, so you have power fists that do 1d8 damage on a hit, so pretty much equal to many martial weapons. So definitely I think that's fine. A creature hit by the gauntlet has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you until the start of their next turn from the essentially distracting pulse that these emit, which is awesome. This is effectively an ability that barbarians have, but now is attached to a caster, and I love this because I love being able to play like martial casters. It's one of the things that I've always loved since I've played the Magus, one of my favorite classes in Pathfinder, and the Duskblade in 3.5. Those were my like initial classings of like those, and I love them so much. So this is definitely like that's why I always love the Artificer in this game, that it kind of gives me that ability. And I used to love the Bladesinger, but since the Artificer's come out, I've played it much less. But I do love this as well. Oh, and the Hexblade is also always a good option. But then the defensive field, so you gain a bonus action. On each of your turns, you gain temporary hit points equal to your level in this class, replacing any temporary hit points you already have. So if you take off the armor, you lose the temp HP. But still, this literally is just a bonus. Like, this is something that I think will honestly be changed. I think this will be changed. There's no way that this defensive field is allowed to be used every turn, essentially every turn you can use a bonus action to effectively heal yourself as long as you take less than 10 damage. Like if you start a turn, you say you're early in the initiative, so you haven't been hit yet, you're going in, you get the punch in, you go bam, you get that big punch in. Now you emit your defensive field, so you get 10 temporary HP. Now we're saying this is at level 3, so this is before many other creatures have many other multi-attacks or potentially high damage, unless you're fighting a Sahuagin. But say you're fighting, a non-multi-attack creature, that creature doesn't do more than 10 HP to you, you immediately essentially heal all that 10 HP. Granted, yes, it's all temporary, but you go from maybe 2 temp HP to 10 temp HP again, and they have to start over again. They have to try to keep beating that 10 temp HP, and it's always a constant pad. So even if you do take, say, 15 damage every turn, you're only actually taking 5 damage, which is crazy. That's crazy strong, and I don't think this will last in terms of being able to do every turn, but currently this exists in doing every turn. It's very strong. I definitely think it will change, but I do love it. Qualify that. This is going to be a longer episode, by the way. So if you wanted to make sure that was clear. So Infiltrator, one thing I do like, but I do question, the problem I kind of have with it is that why would you kind of worry about having heavy armor if you were just going to be ranged anyway? It's one of those things that doesn't necessarily seem it doesn't immediately seem like it makes as much sense, but armor class is still armor class, and you will get hit by things even at range. And one of the things that this does do, so I'm going to kind of skip ahead, but it's the second skin. And because this makes it so that your heavy armor does not impose disadvantage on stealth checks, this makes it very viable for anybody that wants to actually do range and potentially be more of a sneaky type player, which does benefit the range aspect, which now we'll go back to. Your gem-like node appears on one of your armored fists. It counts as a simple ranged weapon with a normal range of 90 feet and a long range of 300, so 90, 300. So past 90, it just takes disadvantage, but you can still hit that creature. 300 feet is just out of the range. So it'll do 1d6 lightning damage. It's a little weak, honestly, but that's because on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with it, you can deal an extra 1d6 damage to the target. So essentially, because this will eventually get extra attack knowingly, one of those attacks you can add extra damage. You can do 2d6. So that makes it very strong. I actually like that. I like that it's just once on a turn you can do one extra 1d6. To me, I like that better than like having a limited amount of times that you can do that 1d6, because it helps you in the long term. Because if it's something like your wisdom modifier, that doesn't scale necessarily very well. If you do it now, I would argue what they should do is that they should allow more functionality to having a limit on the amount of times for abilities based on your proficiency modifier. Because eventually that can become 5, and that can be a really good scaling feature. I don't think that would be a good scaling feature for this ability. I think the way it is just fine. It's the way I would prefer it to be. All right, so extra attack. You're going to attack twice rather than once. Duh. But obviously really good for a martial melee class, similar to Battlesmith. Battlesmith also has extra attack. It's something that should exist for something that wants to be a fightery kind of artificer like this one. So I'm totally fine with it. I'm a little bummed that Artificer doesn't get it, or not Artillerist doesn't get it, but I also see why, so it's fine to me. All right. Sorry. So the armor mods. So this is something that can be used for really good things. So your armor now counts as separate items for the purposes of your infused items. So the armor, the chest piece, the boots, braces, and a weapon. Each of those items can bear one of your infusions in addition to the maximum number of infusions. In addition to the maximum number of infusions, now you get 2 extra infusions. So like at level 3, instead of only being able to have 2 of your used infusions, you can now do 4. That's crazy useful. But arguably, you have now essentially increased a lot of those things. But this is super nice. Now, at 9th level, that does change. Now, we're looking at 9th level, which, if I remember correctly, we'll just move to the Artificer table over here. Now we want to look, because obviously we want to look at the class table. If I can find it. There you go. At level 9... we'll be able to infuse 3 items. So we go from 3 to 5, which is great, though, because normally you wouldn't be able to do 5 until level 14. So essentially, 5 levels early, we'll be able to have 2 more infusions. It's awesome. Super useful for this type of build where you want to be really tanky. But this also can make you too tanky, so I would argue maybe... technically, 1 probably is better, but this will help you in terms of scalability, which is something that I think a lot of classes do tend to struggle from. And the game, I think 5e as a whole struggles from, which is scaling into that late level in terms of like growth. But it's not crazy. But just some things are better than others in terms of that scalability. I think that's a conversation for another day. All right, level 15, you get protected armor. Oh yeah. By the way, those 2 have to be part of your power armor, so it does. I forgot to make that note. Sorry. So either your boots, your chest piece, your bracers, or your weapon. So essentially, your 2 extra ones just go to your armor. But still, that's awesome because it does let you. For example, if you were going to do enhanced defense or enhanced weapon or radiant weapon or something like that already, being able to just then have 3 of your other items be either like a repeating shot, or even repeating shot for your weapon. Actually, that wouldn't make sense. Never mind. But if you want to do like a repeating shot for a party member, this really what this does is it allows you to put more infusions towards your party, which is really beneficial, which really helps. Or you can obviously just do something else. Or like different items. Like you can replicate more items, which is awesome. All right. So now let's go back. So perfected armor. So for Guardian, this means that when a creature you can see ends its turns within 30 feet of you, you can use the reaction to force the creature to succeed on a strength saving throw or be pulled up to 30 feet toward you to an unoccupied space, so essentially next to you. And then you can make a melee attack as a part of your reaction, which is awesome. You can do this reaction 3 times equal to a number of 3 times equal. Oh, a number of times. Sorry, I don't know why I was reading that as a 3. A number of times equal to your intelligence modifier. So, arguably, hopefully close to 4 or 5 at this point. And then finish at a long rest. For Infiltrator, let's see. So, the glimmering from the lightning. So, the glimmering creature sheds Wait. Any creature that takes light damage from your lightning glimmer or lightning launcher glimmers with the light. They shed light within 5-foot radius and any essentially fairy fire. So they attacks against them have advantage, and attacks that do hit deal an extra 1d6 lightning damage, which is cool. Also, new infusions, something that I do like, because obviously if you're going to be wanting to add more benefits to armor and whatnot, this will help you. So your armor of magical strength essentially allows you to use your intelligence modifier and place your strength modifier while making strength checks and strength saving throws. Obviously very useful. 4 charges, which is fine. You know, it's kind of just like having a magical item, so it makes sense to me. I do like this a lot, though. Very useful for actually wanting to seem strong and like do kind of strong things, but then being able to kind of back it up. So I do like that. Armor of tools is something I also think is decently cool. The tools remain integrated in the armor for 8 hours. Essentially, you can integrate artisan's tools or thieves' tools into your armor itself. Only one tool integrated at a time. You can add your intelligence modifier to the ability checks with the integrated tool, which does also help with the skill aspect. It's cool to have tools, but it doesn't help if you can't use them. And being able to create infusions to supplement that or really to kind of deal with it does help a lot. Mind Sharpener, I don't remember reading this. Let me see. An infused item can send a jolt to the wearer, refocuses their mind while wearing this infused item. Whenever the creature fails a Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on the spell, it can use its reaction to succeed instead. Okay, so useful. And then Spell Refueling Ring. The creature can recover 1 expended spell slot as a reaction. The maximum level of the slot is equal to the number of magic items the wearer is currently attuned to. Once the ring can't be used again like this again until dawn. Okay. So, which is useful because arguably if you can get up to essentially 5 at level 9, you can recover up to a 5th level spell slot at level 9, which means you could essentially, by level 9, you have the possibility, if you put all of your infusions to yourself, or no, I forget, because how many... sorry, I forgot the attunement stuff changes, but I forget how many at 9 you can do. Sorry, I had it confused. Not infused, but attuned. That was my bad. I apologize. However, you do get more infusions as you level up. I just don't remember exactly where. So 10th level, you can attune up to 4. So you'll be able to get at 10th level, you'll be able to get to a 4th level slot, which is awesome. Otherwise, it'll be... Otherwise, it essentially will be 3, because not every magic item will obviously require attunement. And then, let's see, I think it goes up to 5 at level 14. So then you'll be able to do all of your spell slots, which will be really useful. All right, let's move on. Okay, so the Artificer I do like a lot. The main reason I'm really glad to see this stuff for the Artificer is actually because, more importantly, the reason I like this is because it kind of showcases that Wizards are going to be willing to work on the Artificer and this class that they've finally added, that it took them essentially 3 years to add, not even, well, more than that, I think. When did 5e launch? I always forget. I always forget the exact time that 5e launched. All right, this helps me with nothing. Here we go. 2012. Took 8 years to add a class. 8 years. So I'm glad that now that they're finally doing that, now we are finally seeing, at least with that, we are finally seeing I'm glad that they're clearly showing that they're still going to be working with it and making it kind of happen, which is good. It does make it feel like then that buying something like Eberron and being able to play the Artificer isn't entirely a dead-end road, and it only can survive on Homebrew, which is nice. All right, so let's move on to the Druid. Circle of the Stars is really cool. So star map, essentially, you'll kind of always have this little you'll always have a map that essentially is kind of part of, seemingly in a way, it seems like it's kind of meant in a way to like guide you and grant power from the actual stars themselves. I do wonder if, so I did have the thought, like kind of with all the psychic nonsense and now the circle of the stars, it does make me think if Franny's prediction of Spelljammer may be not so far off, but we'll have to see. Otherwise, it may also be stuff for Wild Knot. We don't know. It would be a little strange though, because Wild Knot comes out in like 2 weeks, so I don't think so. But anyway, so then you get into your starry form. So instead of using your wild shape, you essentially kind of you will start glowing. You'll kind of look like you have essentially star constellations on you. It's probably in concept a very cool thing. But then you can either use chalice. Let's see, because it's the whenever you pick, you essentially choose either like chalice, which allows you to gain some temp HP, or allows you to better heal your allies. Sorry, wrong one. I was thinking of something else. But yeah, so essentially, if you heal somebody with Cure Wounds, you can either heal yourself or somebody within 30 feet of you an extra D8 plus half of your level, which is always good in that class. Archer, which allows you to do essentially a ranged spell attack, which is kind of nice because it does give you at least a decent, like if you're without spells and whatnot, or any decent cantrips for like at least early on, it does at least give you something if you don't have much for like ranged cantrips. It's also a bonus action, so you can still do a cantrip and this. While it is a ranged spell attack, this is a class ability, it is entirely separate. So that's what's really good about this and something I do like about it. And then Dragon, which you can make a intelligence or wisdom check or a constitution saving throw to maintain. You can treat a roll essentially for concentration. You can treat a roll of 9 or lower as a 10. So it's kind of like that rogue ability. It's kind of like the rogue ability, except instead this one just for concentration. Classic Omen is really interesting. You roll a d6. If it's even, every time you attack, let's see, I think it's whenever a creature you can see within 30 feet of you makes an attack roll. So pretty much when your allies try to attack a creature, you can add a d6 to the roll, which is really good as a reaction. Or any time that a creature, for odds, if a creature is going to attack one of your allies, you can use your reaction to reduce a d6. So kind of useful for both, but honestly I would prefer Woe probably most of the time, just for the way that I play Druid, a little more support like. But you can do it as many times equal to your Wisdom mod, which I think is generally a fine way of doing limitations on ability counts. So I think it's fine. It's something you'll just kind of have to deal with. So Full of Stars is just cool. It kind of makes you incorporeal, so you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Very useful, something that I do like a lot. Starflare. So you obviously notice that I'm spending a lot less time on these, and it's actually just because I think a lot of the main level main classes from the game don't actually require as much talkings about in terms of like how they relate to the base class and what they could do. Artificer just has a lot to deal with, especially because it's new. But Druid, having been around for quite some time, and Ranger as well, eventually, you'll kind of get the picture. All right, but Starflare. So this is solidly decent ability, and I do actually think it's kind of interesting, mostly just because if you've seen our show enough, you'll know that we do have a kind of negative reputation for friendly fire, especially for certain people. So if you had the Starflare ability, it would allow you to do an AoE effect, essentially an AoE spell type effect or ability, but not actually damage your allies, which is awesome. You can essentially just take this 30-foot radius, you can dump it on a bunch of enemies that are hurting your friends, but then move your friends just outside of that 30-foot radius so they can still, on their turn, reach them as long as they're not a dwarf or small creature. Sorry. And then make their way in. Now, if they are like a halfling barbarian, well, they're going to have more speed anyway. If they're halfling fighter, then they might be a little out of luck unless they took mobile. But otherwise, yeah, this is the downside of that would be the main downside of this ability. Honestly, one that I think I'd be willing to make. They also can just choose not to. They have to be willing. So if that fighter really is just like, I'll just tank the hit, I don't want to waste 2 turns to get there. Meh. They can just choose not to. They can just choose not to do it and go for the con save. So there's always that. But it's once per long rest, which I think for something at 14th level is a little strange to me personally. It's not something that I would honestly like to see in terms of that level. I don't think it's supremely powerful. Like, it's arguably not much different than a spell that you would be utilizing at that level. Like, let's go to a druid. Like, what level of spell are they going to be casting at level 14? At level 14, they're going to be going up to a level 7 spell, which is something that I think would have a 4d10 quite a number of times. Now, yes, you could argue they only can do up to a 4th level spell twice at that point. Or no, sorry, they can do a 5th level spell twice at that point. But still, even at a 5th level, you can do close to a 4d10 on some spells. So it's something that I would maybe like to see more than once, or it's some type of ability to get it on like a short rest or something. Oh, that's right, I forgot about this. This is actually my bad. I got in a whole heap about it for nothing. You in fact get it if you expend a spell slot of 5th level or higher. So you have 4 chances at level 14. You have 4 chances to get that spell back, which is something that I have done with characters at 14 and above for druids, or even any spellcaster. So I've used my high level spells quite frequently. So it is something that is actually pretty realistic and is actually not as bad now that I've seen it. So never mind. Good on them. Good on that one. So overall kind of opinion on that druid subclass, it's something that I think would be really cool. It's something I would love to try out and see how it is. I think it could be great for support and a little bit of damage yourself, depending on what your needs are at any given time. So that's something that I think this is a subclass that I probably would be interested in, and I kind of can't wait to maybe put into some type of NPC into the future. So finally, let's go into the forgotten class of this game. So one would say, why bother even going over the Ranger? But that's actually because Wizards has been trying to do a really good job at getting the Ranger somewhere that can be making it a little more fun with its subclasses. For example, Horizon Walker was one of my favorite subclasses. It just suffers from the aspect that it doesn't get its teleport and shoot ability. I forget the name of it, but it doesn't get it to late much. I think level 10 or 11. 11. It would be this 11 one, which is a kind of a downside because it's a long time to really be doing something that's actually useful, but it's really cool when you get to level 11. So I would love to see more subclasses for Ranger that make it more interesting because they can be done. Now let's move into that. So this is all centered around the Fae. So you're the Fae Wanderer, obviously. So you get a little bit of Feywild gifts. So you can get illusory butterflies that flutter around you while you take a short or long rest. This would be good for, obviously, a Naladrin. That could be something that would be really useful. Your shadow dances while no one is looking directly at it. That's something I always find very funny. I do like the idea of a delicate horns or antlers kind of being a faunus or fawn. I think that could be really cool. But let's get into the actual abilities. So the spell, you get some extra spells, always kind of helpful. Or did you get spells? Did I not go over those with the druid? No. Okay. I did not miss that. So Fey Wanderer spells, you get Charm Person, Misty Step, Dispel Magic, Banishment, and Mislead. All things that make sense for trying to be something that is kind of part of the Fey. Obviously not very offensive, but I don't think Ranger requires as much of offensive spells. They need much more utility-based spells because they are designed with their class features and their essentially how they are built to be fine combatively on their own. The spells are meant to supplement them and their party and their ability to be a ranger. So I'm totally fine with this as a whole. Oh, my nose itches. So this cutting will. So your experience with the Fae. So you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. Not useful if you're already an elf, but that's fine. In addition, here's the useful part at least, you gain proficiency with the following skills of your choice: deception, performance, or persuasion. So if you're starting at level 1 and you intend to pick this up, I would refrain from choosing one of those skills or ask your DM just to swap it for another skill. Essentially going with the idea that when you get this class, if essentially you have either all three. If you have all three already for some reason, then inevitably you can just choose an extra skill. So any of the other ones that you could have used for your class, but instead you are just replacing this ability with that. So you're still getting an extra skill at this point, but you've just already used it. But that's something that you would have to ask with your DM. But many of the DMs I've worked with have done that, pretty much done that. All right, another level 3 ability, useful because this would be a really underwhelming, even though you get spells and this ability, these would be somewhat underwhelming for level 3, especially for Ranger. It doesn't get much in terms of pure class abilities. So let's see, so you can augment your attack, so you gain a bonus action that you can use to imbue the weapon or weapons you're currently holding with magic. Until the end of the turn, the weapons are magical and they deal an extra 1d6 psychic damage on a hit. A creature can take this extra damage only once per turn. The one thing so they specify in this that the 2-weapon fighting, if you are 2-weapon fighting, as long as you're holding both your weapons when you do this, they'll both be magical. What I don't understand is, so they say that a creature can only take this damage only once per turn. What I don't like about that is that if you are 2-weapon fighting, that means you have to hit another creature. Otherwise, at least there's kind of no point. But the big but on that is if you miss with that only is the case if you hit with your first attack. If you miss with one weapon, you now have the chance to still do that 1d6 psychic damage with your second one. So that is where that's very useful. I just honestly believe that if it's either if it's something you just scale to later, but if at least at some point that this potentially has a way of scaling. Now, if I don't fully remember if maybe this does later, but it's something that I would like to see this kind of scale as you level up. All right, but then the blessings of the courts. So once during each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend a spell slot to deal extra psychic damage. The extra damage is 3d6 psychic damage, and the creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the end of your turn. In addition, whenever you make a charisma check, you gain a bonus to the check equal to your wisdom modifier. So this is 2 things, which is very useful. So obviously you get, if you do ever have, so this allows you to do even just more psychic damage. So here's where that scaling comes in. So we're adding on to abilities. But this is actually a design that you don't see super often, and I actually really love when I see it, which is essentially it's not just pure like when you become level 5, this now becomes 2d6. Like at level 7, not only do you have this, but now we're adding this on top of it. So when you hit a creature, so once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature, you use just any old spell slot. So it can be a level 1 spell slot, especially if you're a ranger. Not always using a lot of those spell slots, so it's not a terrible idea. That's not a bad resource pool at all for rangers whatsoever. And then you do extra damage. You do extra 3d6 damage. They can be frightened of you. And when you do, and just no matter what, then passive ability, every time you make a charisma check, you can add your wisdom modifier. And it's adding on top of that. So it's both your charisma and your wisdom. So if you already had like a +2 and then you have a +4 to your wisdom, boom, you got a +6. You sound super great now. You're a real good talker now. That wisdom is now backed up with proper speech. Who would have thought? All right, I think Beguiling Twist. So you learn how to manipulate mind-altering magic, channeling it from your allies toward others. Whenever creature you can see within 120 feet of you succeeds on a saving throw against being charmed or frightened, you can use your reaction to force a different creature you can see within 120 feet to succeed on a wisdom saving throw against your spell saving D3 or suffer one of the following effects. All right, so say an ally succeeds on a throw against being charmed or frightened. You can force either anybody else, literally anybody else that isn't the one who just saved, to now make their own wisdom saving throw against your DC, and they can be charmed or frightened for a minute. They can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of their turns, or take 3d10 psychic damage. That's pretty sweet. At level 11, that's a little bit better, especially because this is just a reaction. There seemingly is no limitation on this. So far, honestly, this is a subclass that would make me want to play Ranger. Like, no joke. This subclass at this point, this makes me want to play Ranger because this has such little limitations in terms of using the abilities, and they're constantly growing with each other and doing more and being able to still be able to apply pressure as a presence in the field when you don't really get that from the class itself. So this subclass is really making up for a lot of the things that are in the main class, which is good because the main class does not give you a lot. Finally, Misty Presence. As a bonus, you gain a bonus action that you can use to force a creature you can see within 30 feet to make a wisdom save. On a failed save, the target can't see or hear you for 24 hours. The target can repeat their saving throw at the end of any turn, which you hit it with an attack roll, or force it to make a saving throw, or deal damage to it. The effect ends early if you use this bonus action again, so if you use it on somebody else. On a successful save, the target is immune to this feature for 7 days. Makes sense. It'd be a little strong to be able to use every other turn on different people. Once you've used this bonus action, you can't use it again until you use a long rest, or you expend a spell slot of 4th level or higher to use it again. Again, you're getting that realm of being able, because this is a half caster, so you're getting that realm of being able to utilize your spell slots as a way to recover and use more abilities. I like that a lot. Honestly, like I said, this is a subclass that I really like. This would make me want to play Ranger. This is awesome. I love this subclass. I think it'd be really fun. I'm definitely going to give it a try out someday. However, there are a lot of awesome things in this Unearthed Arcana. However, one thing that I am finding somewhat of a concerning aspect, and as I feel something that we somewhat as a total community kind of have to discuss with ourselves, is what is the amount of power creep that is beginning to show up. I have started to notice with a lot of UA things that there is becoming a greater and greater kind of showcase of power creep in all of the new subclasses that show up. I think Xanathars is one of the biggest proponents of that. Not for every class, but it was kind of the first big push in that realm. And obviously it was the first book to really add a lot of subclasses, to be fair. But it was one where it kind of showcased that a lot of the newer stuff is generally being pretty strong and sometimes a lot more favorable compared to its PHB counterparts. But I don't think power creep can exist the same way. I think it's which is somewhat to Wizards' credit, but I think it's to the credit of the way RPGs work as a whole, especially RPGs in this game work, which is that power creep only matters when you let it. So I would argue that yes, I would choose, if I was a power player, I would choose Fey Wanderer over every other Ranger subclass. Everyone, all the time. It's too good. It's way too good. I just wouldn't want to use any other, especially any other PHB one for that matter. And for example, all of the Ranger subclasses in Xanathars are better than all the ones in PHB. So I would still, again, kind of argue that there's some power creep there. The The Artificer one kind of goes in the realm of power creep already because it kind of replaces Battlesmith. You know, it kind of gets in the way of Battlesmith. It gets extra attack, it has a great amount of defense, and it still gets a solid amount of offense in both spells and just punching or shooting things. You know, it gets a lot of good stuff for it, and it makes it very hard to say why I would want to be a Battlesmith over this, unless, again, things do change and they fix that. But it's just something that I think that we somewhat have to kind of discuss with ourselves in terms of not exactly if it's happening, because I think no matter what, power creep is an inescapable factor in every game. But power creep only matters in this game if you really let it. And that's if you kind of play in somewhat of a min-max kind of fully optimized character build type of way. So I think it's something that we probably should make ourselves aware of and maybe think about. And it could potentially go into the realm of maybe why we could use something like a PHB 2 or starting to revise versions of the PHB. I think now with so many digital content out there, I don't think it matters as much if there is a second print PHB, because I think so many of the changes aren't going to be as substantial that they can be fixed or worked on their own. And if anything, people may like the original one and still want to use them anyway. It doesn't force you to use a new book, especially if you already have a digital version. And if anything, it just means that you have to just figure out what the updates are. And if anything, you just allow for the updates to just be seen. Therefore, you don't actually have to worry about people and you can essentially finding ways to make it work for everybody with the digital tools that exist. So essentially using like these little PDFs to showcase maybe just what the changes are going to be, so that people who already have a player's handbook can just download one of these PDFs and call it a day. Maybe essentially only charging them like $5. So for like the use licensing or whatever the hell, inherently just do that, so they don't have to spend an extra $30 to $50 on an entirely new book, rather than they can just get updated versions. I think that's something that Wizards should do, and I would like to, and potentially maybe to update things like, for example, their revised Ranger thing. They did start publishing new players' handbooks with slight modifications to Ranger to make it help, but it was never as good as that revised Ranger, and everybody really wanted that, and we never got it. So I would really argue that what they should just do is eventually do just kind of like a player's handbook 2 or a print or a second print type thing. So maybe change the cover slightly or something like that. So people who are starting out can obviously get their own new player's handbook, and it'll have all the things that are important, but then you essentially utilize your digital database in order to store all of the old things that existed. Therefore, the old stuff is still accessible, but then you also know what the changes that were made were. And if anybody just wants to still use their old book and just maybe only use some of the new stuff, they can just buy this PDF and just bam, they can just see what the changes that were made are and just apply them. Even if that just means like essentially taping over the pages in a way. It's something that I think could be useful, and I think it's something that could be done, I think, to help that out. But I always love looking at Unearthed Arcana. I always love play testing this stuff. It's really fun. Obviously, I made some notes in this video about what are some things that could be changed as we went through, but these obviously are also played before I've been able to play any of these and play test any of them. So by all means, they're just taken at face value. And I would love to hear what you have gotten up to with any of these Unearthed Arcanas already, or at least even if you're watching this later, what you've seen and what you would like to see change and what you think about them. Let me know in the comments below. This was an extra long episode. Thank you so much for watching. Our next episode is going to be of standard time, and I can't say what we're going to be talking about because I don't know, but I'll see you then. So long. You can kind of just do a very quick and dirty like custom background in the character creator, but otherwise you can create one yourself. You can create your own feat, and this is something that I have had struggles with when specifically trying to make your Dragon Mark race